In the British general election of April the 9th, 1992, the Conservatives had a new leader because in November 1990, a caucus or parliamentary group revolt and strong challenge to her leadership in the form of Michael Heseltine, a former cabinet minister, had forced, alongside the negative or pessimistic predictions of her cabinet ministerial colleagues, had forced Prime Minister Thatcher to resign. The British economy had started to slow down. Her confrontational style of governing had created a lot of bad blood between the more moderate or so-called One Nation conservatives and those who were ideologically more conservative or right-wing conservatives like she was. And all the members of her original cabinet from 1979 had resigned. The last one to resign had been Sir Geoffrey Howe, who in his resignation speech earlier in November 1990 in the House of Commons had criticized Thatcher for being a too demanding and unsupportive leader for her cabinet colleagues and fellow conservatives. Instead, the caucus or parliamentary group chose, although not with an overall majority, John Major, who had served as junior Minister of Social Affairs and then briefly as Chancellor of the Exchequer and even Foreign Minister. He was considered a more moderate conservative than Margaret Thatcher, and his outward image was that of a smiling, nice and kind British gentleman. He promised a so-called classless society and a country at ease with itself. He did abolish the controversial poll tax or community charge, which had tried to equalize the municipal tax rates between Britain's various regions and, of course, municipalities. It was opposed by many Britons who had wanted generous services from their municipal governments but had been unwilling to pay much for them. And indeed, thousands of Britons had demonstrated against the poll tax and had even refused to pay it. The British economy was caught in what the US president at the time, George Bush, called a global economic slowdown. And indeed, almost all the pre-election opinion polls predicted either a narrow majority for the Labour Party, still led by Neil Kinnock, or a hung parliament in the House of Commons where no party would have an overall majority. The Conservatives were the only major party not to promise to raise the income tax. The Labourites had promised to raise it for those Britons who would earn more than £22,000 per year. When all was said and done, the Conservatives received 41.9% of the vote, taking over 14,093,000 votes, and won 336 seats, still a workable majority in the 651-member House of Commons. The Labourites again gained votes and seats, but not enough to unseat the Conservatives, with 34.4% of the vote and 271 seats. The Liberal Democrats, under their new leader Paddy Ashdown, received 17.8% of the vote and 20 seats, with the rest of the House of Commons seats being occupied by regional and nationalist members of Parliament. So John Major, amid the lingering recession, formed another Conservative majority government. However, the government soon ran into difficulties in its financial and economic policies, and then there were controversial scandals and resignations of cabinet ministers its program Back to Basics, whose purpose was to promote the traditional family values, seemed somewhat inconsistent with the private lives of some conservative backbenchers. And although the economy did start to grow, Major's leadership became increasingly shaky. In 1995, he suddenly resigned his leadership, daring his opponents to challenge him, and although he did easily defeat his lone challenger, he received only 3 more votes than the minimum number of votes he would have considered necessary to stay on as leader. And by sometime in 1996, owing to resignations and deaths of members, Major lost his overall majority. In 1994, the Labourites had elected a young and dynamic and articulate leader, Tony Blair, and their lead in the opinion surveys had increased, boding a bad result in the next general election for the Conservative government.